All right, folks, let's dive into something that's been making waves in geopolitics lately. We've got updates on the Russia-Ukraine peace talks, India's wobbly position between the US and China, some moves in Europe and Asia that Beijing's not gonna like, and this is the big one. What all of this says about Trump's overall strategy. Spoiler, no matter where you look, it all keeps circling back to China. So first, the White House announced that Putin is going to meet Zelensky within about 2 weeks. Some people are already asking, wait, is Trump just getting played by Putin here? What if Putin flips again? But honestly, I don't think that's the point. The only reason Putin is even willing to come to the table, in Alaska no less, is because Trump's sanctions plan has real bite. The damage is that big, and if Putin does flip, Trump still has what's called the secondary sanctions option, which could hit not only Russia, but also China's economy really hard. Now, let's shift gears. Remember when people thought India would quickly sign a trade deal with the US? Well, that didn't happen. Instead, Trump actually slapped tariffs on India, up to 50%. 25% of that is basically a penalty for buying Russian oil. Is that full 50% really applied in daily trade? Hard to say, but the point is, no trade deal yet. So the big question, is India breaking away from the US for good? Recently, people are paying more attention to this because India's relationship with China looks like it's warming up. Modi just met with China's Foreign Minister, Wang Yi, in New Delhi, praised steady progress, and announced direct flights, new visas for Chinese tourists, and expanded trade and investment. Sounds like a reset, right? But here's the thing. Modi is betting that if he cozies up to China, he can pressure Trump into backing off. He thinks, I'm important to the US, and if I get closer to America's rival, Trump will panic and give me a better deal. That's the calculation. Do I think India will permanently ditch the US? No. Eventually, India's going to drift back to the American camp. But for now, Modi is testing how far he can push, and there's evidence of that. Apple just announced that all 4 of its upcoming iPhone 17 models are going to be manufactured in India. This is the first time Apple has shifted an entire new generation of iPhones out of China. Tim Cook doesn't make moves like this without knowing the US-India economic relationship will stay strong. That's why I believe, long-term, India still ends up with Washington. Now, let's talk about September 3rd. That's the day China is holding a massive military parade in Beijing to mark the end of World War II. Beijing invited Modi. If Modi actually shows up, that would be a huge symbolic gesture. India fought wars with China in the past, and standing there saluting Chinese tanks rolling by would be a big deal. So far, silence from New Delhi. No confirmation, no denial. What about America's other allies? South Korea's president already said he's not going. Japan and the EU? No word, but don't bet on it. You know who is going? Leaders from Cambodia, Laos, Myanmar, countries with no real alliance with the US. For them, showing up doesn't cost much. But Seoul saying no, that's a blow to Beijing's hopes of pulling more US allies into its orbit. And this highlights a problem in China's foreign policy. Beijing wants to woo Japan, South Korea, and Europe. But then it runs into unavoidable clashes over security, trade, or especially Taiwan. And that's the litmus test. China basically tells every country, if you want close ties with us, you must say Taiwan is part of China. That's the mandatory question. Most democracies just won't play along. Take India. Wang Yi claimed after his meeting with India's foreign minister that India reaffirmed Taiwan is part of China. But Indian media, the Hindustan Times, immediately reported that India denied saying that. In fact, New Delhi hasn't endorsed a one-China policy in years. So even as India and China smile in front of the cameras, when it comes to Taiwan, India refuses to bend. That's why I keep saying, eventually, India ends up closer to the US. And it's not just India. Germany's foreign minister recently visited both Japan and Indonesia. Now, Indonesia usually stays neutral and avoids criticizing China. But what did the German foreign minister do while in Jakarta? He went right at Beijing, warning against China's expansion in the South China Sea and raising alarms about Taiwan tensions. He had already blasted China while in Tokyo. That tells you something. Germany under Merkel used to clash with Trump. But now, Berlin is moving firmly back into alignment with Washington, especially on Asia-Pacific issues. That's why China's foreign ministry came out swinging, accusing Germany of stirring up confrontation. Now let's talk about Taiwan, because this is where words meet action. A lot of people like to point out that Biden said 4 times the U.S. would defend Taiwan militarily, while Trump never said that. True, but actions matter more than words. And if you look at what the U.S. military is actually doing right now, it's clear Trump is taking real steps. Earlier this month, 7,500 troops from 36 U.S. states and territories gathered in Michigan around the Great Lakes for a massive exercise called Northern Strike. It included every branch of the U.S. military: Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, National Guard, basically everyone except Space Force. The kicker? Over 500 Taiwanese soldiers were part of it. That's not speculation, that's public. This is the first time we've seen Taiwan's forces participate openly, not just quietly. Think about that. Entire Taiwanese units are now training in the U.S. And yes, the Great Lakes are inland, but they're massive. Over 240,000 square kilometers, about the size of the UK. It's practically like practicing at sea. 2 B-2 stealth bombers even flew in from Missouri to join. These are the same bombers used in missions against Iran. So we're talking real combat-level training here. Bottom line, the U.S. isn't just sending advisors to Taiwan anymore, or selling them weapons. They're integrating Taiwanese forces directly into large-scale U.S. military drills. That's a signal Beijing can't miss. So what's the big picture here? From sanctions on Russia to tariffs on India, to lining up allies like Germany and South Korea, to openly training with Taiwan, the common thread is all about isolating China. If Trump can push Russia into a peace deal and get sanctions lifted, Moscow re-enters the Western economic system. And guess what? That weakens the Russia-China bond, because long-term, Russia could make more money trading with the West than with Beijing. That's the wedge Trump wants to drive. At the same time, countries like India, Japan, South Korea, and the EU all hit that same wall with Beijing. The Taiwan question. None of them are willing to say Taiwan is part of China. That makes deeper alliances with Beijing almost impossible. So Trump's play is pretty clear. Keep the economic pressure on China. Peel away countries like India and Russia, and build a coalition in Asia and Europe that forces Beijing into a corner. Will he achieve all of this in one term? Probably not. But remember, he's got more than 3 years left, and the moves we're seeing, whether in trade, diplomacy, or military exercises, are all pointing in one direction. China remains the main target. So when people ask, why isn't China part of the Ukraine peace talks? That's actually the answer. Because this isn't about Europe alone. This is about the bigger strategic picture, where the U.S. is focused squarely on China. The upcoming meetings, Putin with Xi, Putin with Zelensky, are going to be fascinating to watch. Will Russia shift its strategy after a peace deal? Will it risk upsetting Beijing if sanctions are lifted and it can do business with the West again? And how will China respond if one of its most important partners starts drifting away? Those are the real questions, and once again, they all come back to the same conclusion. Whether it's trade, military moves, or global diplomacy, Trump's eye is fixed on China. Stay tuned, because this story is just getting started.